All right, here are solutions to quiz 1 for Math 213. In this first one, you are kind of naming the shape. So here it says I'm a shape with 3 angles. Okay, you're thinking triangle. I'm not even going to write that. 3 angles, you got a triangle. And 2 of these angles measure 40 degrees. So let's see if we can sketch something here. Maybe not necessarily drawn to scale. Horrible picture. But if 2 of my angles measure 40 degrees, maybe this is a 40 here, and this is a 40 here, I know that the sum of the angles in any triangle, the interior angles, must be 180. So I used up 80 of them here. I must have 100 left over here. So really, this is what my triangle kind of looks like. And if these 2 angles are the same, that tells me that these 2 sides must be the same. So what I have here is a triangle that is isosceles. And it's isosceles because these 2 side lengths are the same, and these 2 side lengths are the same because these 2 angles are the same. And it is an obtuse triangle. And the reason it's obtuse is because it has an angle. Maybe that should have been in red to really color coordinate this stuff. It has an angle that measures more than 90 degrees. So it's an isosceles obtuse triangle. Part B, I am a convex quadrilateral with a pair of adjacent congruent angles. So I have 2 angles that are right next to each other that are the exact same. And I also have exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. Okay, so I'm going to start with my parallel sides. I don't know how long they are, so I'll just put some really long lines here. And these 2 lines right here are parallel. And then what do I have? I have with a pair of adjacent congruent angles. Okay, so I have 2 more sides somewhere. There's a side over here and there's a side over here. Because I know it's a quadrilateral, so there's 4 sides total. So I have to connect these 2 lines and I have to connect these 2 lines. And I have a pair of adjacent congruent angles. So what that means is that kind of the angle that connects the line that's over here to this line must be the same as the angle over here that connects this line to this line. And what that's going to end up forcing is them to both be right angles. In order for these guys to be congruent, a pair of adjacent congruent angles, I must have a picture that looks like this. So I'm a convex quadrilateral with a pair of adjacent congruent angles and exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. So I'm looking at something like this. So what shape do I have here? Well, if my other side here went straight up and down, I'd have a rectangle, maybe a special rectangle like a square. But it can't go straight up and down because then it would be parallel to this guy over here, and we said that we have exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. So what I need to do is draw a line connecting the 2 green lines that's not parallel to this line over here. So I don't know, maybe something like this. And so what have I just drawn? I've drawn a trapezoid. You kind of, maybe I'll go over this in red so it's easier to see where my shape is. I have a trapezoid. And in this case, it's non-isosceles. But I'll put that parenthetically, and I'll spell it wrong. Isosceles. Because I don't care as much that you say that. As long as you call it a trapezoid, I'm good. Maybe I'll even write that this part is optional. Call it a trapezoid, I'm a happy man. But it's not isosceles because this angle is not the same as this angle. And the reason why is because this angle has to be 90 degrees in order for these 2 to be congruent. And this cannot be 90 degrees in order for these 2 to not be parallel. I'm a convex quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of opposite congruent angles. Okay, so I have an angle over on this side and an angle over on this side, and they are congruent. So I don't know what their angle measure is, but maybe I'll just draw something that looks like this. And then the answer ends up being a kite. So maybe I'll draw the answer, and then I can explain how I knew that that was the answer. This angle must be congruent to this angle. But these sides must also be the same. Oh, that's not true. A little bit. I'm going to add a little caveat here. I'm going to say, and at least, doesn't say at least, try again. At least one pair of adjacent, congruent sides. So now I'm talking about something that looks like this. It turns out that in this picture, these sides are also congruent. So there's actually two pair of adjacent congruent sides. But in this case, what we're talking about is a kite. You might think that it could be a dart, and it almost could. The reason it can't be a dart is because it's convex. What else might you think it is? You might think that it's, I don't know, a rhombus, but it can't be a rhombus because it says it has exactly one pair of opposite congruent angles, and a rhombus actually has two pair of opposite congruent angles, similar for a square or a rectangle. So I think the only possible answer here will be a kite. Thinking parallelogram, that could be another option, but the problem with the parallelogram is it has two pair of opposite congruent angles. So I think everything is eliminated. I keep pausing this because I want to make sure that I'm right. I'm pretty sure kite is the only answer there. I guess that would be the end of number 1. Number 2, for each statement below, first determine if the statement is true or false. Then if it's true, justify. If it's false, give a counterexample. Any quadrilateral that is both a rectangle and a rhombus is a square. This is a true statement. The reason this is true is because if it's a rectangle, you have 4 90-degree angles. And if it's a rhombus, you have 4 congruent sides. And if you have 4 90-degree angles and 4 congruent sides, what that means is you have a square. I don't think I had to draw anything. Explain why. Good enough. Any trapezoid with a pair of congruent sides is an isosceles trapezoid. This is a false statement. I think we went over this exact one in class because the handout that somebody made for you, I gave to you, had some kind of misleading information on there. A trapezoid with a pair of congruent sides. Consider this trapezoid right here. Almost a trapezoid. It's a trapezoid because this is parallel to this. And it's got congruent sides because this side has the same length as this side. But it's not an isosceles trapezoid because this angle is not the same as this angle down here. So that's a false statement. And C, any convex quadrilateral with 2 pair of congruent sides and no parallel sides must be a kite. That's a false statement. And the reason that's false is it's only true, maybe I'll say only true if these sides, if these side pairs are adjacent. So if the congruent pairs are opposite, I could have something that looks like, let's see, sure. I think this would work. Any convex quadrilateral with 2 pair of congruent sides. This is congruent to this, and this is congruent to this. And no parallel sides. Oh, that's not going to work. Okay, what about this guy? Oh, that's not going to work either because I'd end up with them parallel. This is a true statement. How about that? True. If the pairs are opposite, we must have parallel sides. So the pairs must be adjacent. And if they're adjacent, that implies that we have a kite. D, any convex quadrilateral with a pair of adjacent congruent sides and two sets of parallel sides is a rectangle. I think this is a true statement. And if you try to draw it, you say, all right, I got two sets of parallel sides. So let's see here. Let's try to draw something that wouldn't work. This. Oh, this might not work. Maybe this is false. A convex quadrilateral with a pair of adjacent congruent sides, okay, and two sets of parallel sides is a rectangle. That's false. And the reason it's false could be a rhombus. Maybe I should write like at least here, with at least a pair of adjacent congruent sides and two sets of parallel sides is a rectangle. That's false. It could be a rhombus. And note, drawing a square is not a counterexample. Wait, why? Because a square is a rectangle. It's just a special kind of rectangle, but a square is a rectangle. So you couldn't draw a square and say, no, it's a square, because a square is a rectangle. So to show that it's false, you want to reference this rhombus shape here. All right, I think that is the end of the quiz, so I'll stop this video here.